Okay, let's see. No problem. This better not be about bravado.
No. License issue?
Well, you getting a license problem? Are you connected to the network?
Yeah, I did.
Helmstat, yeah. So, yeah, you know more than I do. What's 111 do? Never tried 111. Anybody having trouble with the license?
We're getting status.
For Virtuoso?
License plate.
Says
What
can't
was the
find
license plate?
Is Virtuoso running?
Yeah, I just launched it a couple seconds ago.
Let me try to. Let's see. Is this the problem?
Yeah, I have a different one, but it's regarding the license. Yeah, it's the same problem. It opened up yesterday, but
You did solve it?
one day before it opened, yesterday I tried, I had the same issue.
Yeah, it was working yesterday. I did that.
You're having choreography,
Yeah.
so can you add this line to that directory? I have the same problem.
Where is the config file?
So in your installation directory, there will be a config file, just add that line.
Looks like it came up for me. Because you're not even getting it to run, right? It's just coming back with a license problem. Right? Failed to check out
The
license.
same license problem.
You've authenticated. You have to authenticate, right? You've authenticated.
Authenticate what?
Well, go to the browser. How do you authenticate? You guys just log in?
Type some URL, it will automatically redirect.
You will have that from here, right?
Then you gotta watch the cache stuff though, right? Like, can you just like go to unm.edu and log in?
Yeah, even they can just go to Google, it should redirect any web page.
Yeah, you have to authenticate, man.
Really?
Yeah, really.
That's why I didn't work then.
It won't deliver, if you don't authenticate, it won't
I was
give you the
using the
license.
authenticator.
Yeah.
If you're on wireless, if you're plugged in, you're okay. If you're on wireless, it won't work. Okay, so, everyone's chugging along on the standard cells. Are we done with them? Okay, and we got, so what they do today, so you guys, can you just bring up one of them? Let me see that you have them done. Because we don't, just wanna make sure everyone is at least,
Kind of.
so I didn't get a chance to, so I think what I wanna do is try to work through, so we did abstract, I wanna make sure everyone's good with the abstract generator, no problems there. And then we have those two files generated, because you guys can't use the one that, I could give you one, but it won't work because it won't have abstracts for your new cells. Now, I want you to work on one more cell, but I didn't get a chance to decide what it is. I think it's just gonna be a MUX-D flip-flop. We're gonna try to do synthesis this time without LSSD. We're gonna use MUX-D, which is much more popular. And then we'll have to figure out how to deal with the setup and hold times, but it's gonna be a cell that just basically looks like this. It's so common, I can do it from memory.
So even the flip-flop we are going to build with muxes.
Transmission gate.
So we can build a latch with two mux, right?
You mean do you wanna use a transmission gate?
No, for D
Implementation?
flip-flop, how do we build? So we
Well,
can.
yeah, we'll go over that. That's it. Believe it or not, that'll take you at least a week to do. Right, so when you build your flip-flop, do it, I think we can just use the transmission gate version, right? It's a tri-state way of doing this too. I think it's. Got enough detail for you? Tell me I haven't been doing VLSI too long. Okay, so this is called a Mux scan flip flop. Mux D flip flop. And it's very common. So common that it's like the most common cell ever, probably. It's how we allow manufacturing tests to be carried out inside of a chip. And it's the least invasive mechanism. This is just, schematic wise, is just a 2-to-1 mux. Right, you guys all recognize this from VLSI, right? There's a scan enable signal, SE. And there's a scan in signal, SI. Okay, so this allows you to bring data through the entire chip without bringing it in through the D inputs. You can just serially scan it in 1 bit at a time. And it just shifts from one register to this one. So this register is, output is Q, but it also drives the scan input of the next register. Right, so as data moves in here, whatever was in here moves into the next cell. And so this whole thing creates a long shift register. Wow, so we're in scan mode, it's a shift register. When we're not in scan mode, it functions as a normal register, D register. Who's seen this before, anyone?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Without the multiplexer at the beginning?
Without the multiplexer? Well, you have an invention there, or we'll get rich. Do you have a way of getting rid of that multiplexer? Well, let's go talk. I'll retire right now. So you built one without the register, the multiplexer?
Yeah, that, the VLSI class.
Oh, that's why that chip didn't work then. I was always wondering why that chip didn't work. Right, so if you take that mux out, then it's just a regular D flip-flop. So what I would do first is probably build, this thing, because I didn't give this to you, right? I don't think you have it in the standard cells, because we didn't use, you may have some like set reset variants of this. You might want to look to see what I gave you.
We need to add a reset?
What's that?
We need to add a reset?
No, what I want you to do is I want you to build one that's plain vanilla, which I don't think I gave you. Okay, we need one, right? This will be the most heavily used of all your cells. This D flip-flop will be very heavily used. We never used them because we wanted to use something that was safer. When you build chips, it's safer to use. Well, it's safer in the sense of, you're guaranteed it's always going to work. Because this guy can actually be subject to what's called hold time violations if you're not careful. You can have a race condition in the scan chain, which you have to get all those out. Otherwise, the alternative is to use what's called LSSD, level sensitive scan design. It's an IBM invention, and it's very different from this. In fact, the synthesis tools don't even like LSSD. LSSD actually uses 2 clocks, one for the master and one for the slave. That way you can just alternatively, non-overlapping clocks, you can move data through the scan chain and never have any set up hold time violations. It's guaranteed because you just make the clocks non-overlapping, and so you dispose of the whole timing issue, right? That you might have if you build this, you may have a timing issue and your scan chain might not work. And a lot of times you heavily depend on if you're building a test chip to get scan data in and out. At least we did. So we played it safe and we did an LSSD version. Actually, and the synthesis tools don't like LSSD. They want something that's called clocked LSSD. Does anyone know what that means? Have you ever heard of a clocked LSSD flip-flop? There are 3 basic scan cells. This is the most popular one by far. But IBM did not use MUX-D. They always used their own. They called it LSSD, level sensitive scan design. But then the level sensitive scan design didn't work well with the single clock assumption when the tool was actually doing synthesis. So the 3rd version that came along that was actually used a lot was something called CLSSD. It was a clocked, and it actually had 3 latches to allow a functional timing path to be timed with a single clock, and then allow a safe scan operation to be done with 2 scan clocks. So they went clock happy. Anyway, we used it and we got stellar results when we built our chip. But it costs a lot. I mean, if you had 3 latches, all of our scan cells, of course, were about 33% larger, or maybe even 50% larger than they needed to be. And then we were afraid that we wouldn't be able to figure out how to get rid of the setup and hold time. But we know more about the tools now, so we're gonna end up doing this in our next chip design, which is far more common. And the tools are already set up to do hold time violations primarily. Anybody know where the hold time violation is that can happen here? So if you have 2 of these in a row, you guys had VLSI, right? So if you have another one, then you'd have, like I said, this guy will go into the circuit, whatever, function. This is your normal storage location for your inputs for your functional unit. And then you usually have capture flip-flops, right? I mean, this is a very common flip-flops on the inputs, flip-flops on the outputs, multiplier. Right.
Output of the first flop, hold time. Hold time will check at the output of the first flop, first flip.
Yeah, but how does it cause? That's the issue.
Oh.
So this is scan enable. So this is D1, this is D2, and then you have another flip-flop. So this is how it's not drawn to size. Right, and then you have clock. Single clock,
Yeah.
right? So when you do scan, this is enabled, right? So that means this path is enabled into D, and then clock will allow whatever shows up here on the rising edge to show up on Q. Q drives the scan input of the next one, right? And then same thing happens, whatever's sitting on here on the rising edge gets latched. So what can happen?
So that.
How can this data get destroyed?
So it could get latched before the preceding clock, the
So
delta comes.
Before C
Because-
to Q transition, this scan enable might have sampled the D2 input to the next flop.
Okay, which means what? The new value that's going into this cell,
Yes, has not been transmitted, but before the data transmits from clock to Q, the second flop has sampled the output data.
okay, so what happens? What's the misbehavior?
So like,
Let's say we have 0 going in, we have 1 on the output,
but
and we have 0 going out. So we're storing 1 here, storing a 0 here. So what should happen? 0 should go in here and 1 should go in here, right?
yes, but it samples the previous data itself, right? If
So what would be the state after the
so
anomaly?
if the hold time has not met, it is still 0 before the second flop has sampled the data. It would
Okay, it's
stay-
1 though, so it's 1 initially, right?
It's 0 at the out, right?
Right, but the new value is gonna be 1.
But because of the hold time violation, even before 1 transmits outside, before it recognizes a 1, it can still see only 0 because of the hold time, right?
No,
The logic is not clear because I think it cannot drive the next flip-flop very strongly. So the logic is not clear, right? At the output of the first flip-flop.
Right, but I'm trying to get you guys to think about the timing here. There's a hold time violation that can occur, right? There are 2 conditions that need to be met in order for that to occur. So what's the first condition? In order for you to have, so what is a hold time violation? Essentially what's gonna happen is you need to hold the 1 on here until the clock finishes its rising points. It needs to be held even after hold time is, the clock goes high, the data can't change. It's gotta remain, right?
Yes.
So if a 1 is supposed to stay here, and we have a hold time violation, then what's actually happening? That 1 is,
That one is going to 0 within this.
so this 0 is propagating through and replacing that 1
Yes.
before the clock has correctly or completely sampled. Okay, that's the hold time violation. Everybody understand that? So the 0 is going in here, the 1 is going in here. Okay, the 1 needs to be held there, right, until the clock finishes going high, and then even after it goes high, it needs to be stable there for a short amount of time. Hold times are usually very small. And if you're violating it, then this 0, as soon as this clock goes high, this 0 is gonna, fly on through, race on down, and then start overwriting that 1, right? And it could overwrite the 1 with a 0, and then violate the hold time violation. Therefore, you could store a 0 here instead of a 1. In other words, both of these cells store a 0, right? They both store this value instead of this one storing the output of this guy. Remember, we want to keep shifting data through this scan chain, right? Can't destroy it. It creates havoc, terrible, terrible headaches in the hardware. A bit changes in your scan chain. It's even hard to diagnose it because it's happening in the middle of the scan chain somewhere. And all you see coming out of the scan chain is all 1s or all 0s or something really bizarre. Right? Doesn't make any sense. What's the second condition? No. There's no setup time problem here. It's not a setup time. What's the second condition for a hold time violation? What also must be true in order for you to have a hold time violation?
Critical path.
This path is too fast, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can fix it. This is what tools typically do. I'm sorry.
Add buffer.
They add a buffer right here. 2 inverters in a row. Problem's gone. But if you think about it, how can this ever happen? My clock goes high here, the clock goes high here simultaneously, then everything works as it's supposed to, right? But the problem is this true?
No, it's not simultaneous.
It's not simultaneous, right? You get a little bit of clock skew, right? You got a clock tree. If this, I'm showing these right next to each other, but what if this next element in the scan chain is across the chip? So you got this,
Wire delay.
you got this long wire. You think, wow, that's going to solve the hold time violation. But now you got a different clock tree driving that other section, and you may have a different skew in that clock. It really is an analog type of phenomenon. That's why it's so hairy and dangerous. But the tools have gotten very good at diagnosing it, and when they see a problem, right, then they know, the tools are very good at doing timing, right? So they know the skews, or they can estimate the worst case skews in these clocks. And so what they'll do is they'll insert a buffer here, and they'll do that automatically. We're going to do that this term when we get to the synthesis part. We did this for the 40 nanometer chip earlier this year, so I know how to do it now. I just got to look at the scripts and see how they implement it. Okay, I didn't mean this to turn into a VLSI lecture, but you need to, it's not a black box you're working with here, guys, right? So, is there any questions on this? Right, correct? So I think this is fairly common to fold these two together. If you look at commercial designs, you'll see that this inverter and this pass gate are folded together into a single tri-state. This is the correct implementation, I think. You literally just take these signals, and then so this inverter is this piece, right? And then what you're going to do is just add these onto the power rails on either end, and then it'll work or behave the same way. Anybody have a problem with this? Yeah. Okay. So this is the slave. You can do this with the master too, of course, right? With the slave. So what do we need? What type of behavior? A is here and B is here. So it's kind of backwards. It should be like flipped, mirrored. So if the clock is high, this is turned off, right? So clock high, this is off, clock bar is 0. So this is right, broken. Does it mean it's floating? Did I do something wrong here? You can't float it. Oh yeah, we have to float it. What am I saying? We have to float it. It's a tri-state, right? So yeah, it better be floating. With a zero, so with a 1 here on a P channel, this is off and this is off, right? So this is undriven. V is not driven. That's the same behavior of the cascade here, right? If clock is 1, this is off. Clock bar is 0, right? So this is tri-stated. Therefore, this guy drives this input, not this guy. Remember this from VLSI? Yeah, I need to see some shaking heads here.
Yeah, but this one actually work on falling edge, not rising edge.
This is a rising edge triggered flip-flop. Because the master is the opposite
Oh, okay.
behavior, right? So the master, you can always consider from the master. So so rising edge triggered means what? We're sampling when the clock is low. So when D changes, this guy changes, this is tri-stated. So whatever happens on D gets reflected up to this point, right? And then as soon as the clock goes high, this guy locks in, right, what's on D, and then this guy samples the master, and then it does the same thing. It brings it around to this point. It remains sensitive to what's in the master, but the master is locked at that point, right? And so it just basically holds the state of what the master has stored. And then when the clock goes low again, this guy locks that state in, this guy starts sampling again, right? This was an exercise you did in payments class, right? Yeah?
We didn't do that much cascades.
What?
We didn't do that much of cascades.
You didn't do much with cascades?
No, last year.
You mean you built this with the like cross-coupled NANDs and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would build this version. This actually works. This performs very well on a VLSI circuit.
How do we size this?
2x. I use again, you got a bunch of internal stuff, right? And then just make a 2x version of it, right? Which means that you only have to size this inverter to be, to build everything 2x. If the tool needs to buffer this, it'll put a sizing buffer in to get up to 4x. I would just build the 2x version, okay? Because the tool will handle the fact if it has Q has a lot of fan out, it'll actually add a buffer right to the output. So the tool will take care of some buffer.
So, like 2x, you mean all the specific transistors 2x?
2x,
There is
yeah.
no equivalent, right? I'm not sure, like how to draw an equivalent for this equivalent inverter.
Equivalent. Oh, for this guy?
No, for the entire gate. Normally, when we are sizing, we'll size according to an equivalent inverter, right? So,
Equivalent inverter.
1x inverter. So if it's a 1x inverter, NMOS would be maybe 200, PMOS would be 360.
Well, you have this. You already have sizes, right?
Yes,
You're going to use the same ones for the design of this. So the question is, do you want it to perform well? And you do. It's a flip-flop, right? So I would build everything as if it was 2x. Build a 2x version. That's what I'm saying. Don't build a 1x version, and don't build. And then for all the internal nodes, I would make, as I advised last time, I'd make those 2x as well. Again, you can build the internals with 1x, but then you suffer a little bit in terms of performance. But you leave a lot of space. You have the space to do the 2x anyways. 2x will be a lot more fun to do the layout too. You'll actually be routing the poly along the top and bottom.
So
I think I have some examples that you guys can leverage, right, to help you with this.
So when you say 2x, so each transistor have to be 360 or
Right,
that
so,
one for
right,
2x?
whatever the sizes were, what, is it 2xN?
AN 2x is 360 and P 2x is 900.
Right, 360 and then 900. Right, and then if you build this, then this is gonna then be the 180, right? So
Yes.
well, it'll be the 720 and the 180,
Yes.
or 1.8,
760, 1.8.
or 1800.
Yeah, 1800.
Yeah, it's all nano, yeah. 1.8 microns, yeah.
So, okay. We can just build that and we just have to repeat it 4 times, right? This particular
Just twice.
for master and slave.
Just, yeah, but you're replacing these two with this.
Yeah.
And then this and this with this.
Yeah.
It's up to you. Do you wanna, you know, because obviously you gotta make these 1.8. But if you see, you know, I just have some experience with commercial stuff, and they typically do this. You don't have to, if you wanna build, because you can make in these 2x, you don't have to do the 1.8 micron versions of the Ps. Because these two series are gonna double the 2x requirement, right? But it still might be smaller because you can keep, you do, you know, you can do series with no contacts, right? And that, I think that's the win that you get, is you get something that's slightly smaller if you build it this way, even though these transistors are bigger. The 1.8 micron devices, they fit, right?
All, yeah, they fit across.
Yeah,
the-
so you don't have to wrap them or double them, finger them. Okay? So, do it. This is all you need. This is, you don't need like a lab report, just build this cell.
So
draw it on.
what is the advantage of this circuit?
What, the MUX?
Like this topology?
Well, this is actually sort of like a minimal sized D flip flop. You really, if you use gates, it's gonna get a lot bigger, right? Do you wanna do the gate version? Come on, you guys should be fluent in this stuff, man. This class is, I know everything about VLSI. So what's the gate version look like?
Bunch of NAND gates.
A bunch of NANDs, okay, a bunch of NANDs.
Just trying to visualize that way.
There's a bunch of NANDs. Is that it?
Bunch of feedbacks.
This is a test for the next 60 seconds. How you do it?
Like,
So you have to get.
You 2 input NANDs or 3 input NANDs?
like if we need reset, it's three input.
No reset. No, we don't. Let's not do the reset. Set
Yeah.
reset first.
We need four
Like
NAND with the feedback from the output of one of them to the input.
Okay. So there's the first part.
Exactly.
Cross coupling, right?
And the latch, and then we need another latch.
So and then that
Keep
input-
going.
So that second input into the next NAND, and then
Okay. Well, we got 2 inputs. A flip flop only has 1. So what do we have to do here?
We need clutch to AND with the D before
So here's D, and then what happens?
we have to AND it with the clutch.
We end it with what?
Clutch.
Oh, I'm going to do that here because I think that's the best way to do it. But
And we can use inverter to give
Okay.
the one and inverter.
so isn't this the way it works? You put an inverter in like this, right? And then what do we do with clock?
So clutch is AND with
We just tie them together like that? Okay, I think so. I haven't done one in a while. I think that's the master, I think. The slave will be somewhere. This is how many transistors?
And 6.
5 seconds is up.
10.
Thank you, 10. How many here?
four.
That's a 3 input gate.
Oh, this is
6.
Oh, okay, that's
6,
more than 10.
12,
14.
14. Just for the master. How many in the master over here? 5, 4, 3, 2. I got them drawn there. How can you not? Yeah, right, 8. So it's cheaper, right? This is faster though. If you really want high performance, you probably build something like this. But this is very common because it's small, and flip-flops are used, you know, tens of thousands of them typically, right? So you're gonna build it small. Same's true for the MUX. I mean, I have, in fact, my library has a couple of versions. Cascade version, and I have a NAND version, right? If you look at the library, I have a couple of MUX versions, and they're different sizes.
This circuit down there, just for the transmission gate as an inverter?
Yeah, it's a cheat. If you do if you do the node analysis, you find that you don't have to have the N and P joined here, right, to carry out the same function, right? That's what happens. The inverter actually brings them, the N and the P together, right, and drives a single output node. If you keep those nodes separate, the P side and the N side separate, and connect it to these two guys in series, you basically get the same operation. You get a tri-state, and then you get the inversion. Both of them still work. And it saves you some contacts, right? Because you don't have to, go out to metal 1 and then up from metal 1 back down into poly for the transmission gate. It's common, that's the reason I bring it up. I haven't actually ever built one this way. But they work. They work just as well. I've looked at them enough.
So that replaces the right transistor in the inverter, that circuit?
Say again? Yeah, so you replace, I'm sorry, did I really? A and B, A and B. Replaces these two. These two you can't do. I don't think you can do it with the other two. It doesn't, I don't think it works. No, you can't. Yeah, it won't work because of the opposite relationship. It doesn't work.
Like the drain is connected to the output of the inverter, right? But here nothing shows.
Well,
So
I think you have the option of either putting A on the outside and then clock and clock bar on the inside, or vice versa. I think it works either way. But yeah, the output of A, which is C, isn't, C is really what? If you flip it and put A on the outside and clock on the then C becomes this node and this node,
yes.
right? And that's what I was saying. You don't have to bring these back together again to get the same function.
It's like handing the clock with the inverter, right?
Yeah.
The logic of it is like handing the.
Yeah, it's ending it, but it's not an AND, it's not a logical operation because it's a tri-state. So you get this weird, floating behavior, but that's what this does, right? And that's what you need. This is why, people do this. In fact, there may be a tri-state inverter that I had in my, did I give you a tri-state inverter? Tri-state inverter is basically this. Allows you to either have 1 or 0 or nothing float on the output. Because you can actually then implement restoring, so the nice thing about having tri-states is that you get restoring behavior. You can't propagate too many of these, right? Otherwise you get signal behavior degradation and horrible rise and fall times, slew rates and everything else. Okay, so is everyone going to show me their cell? I want to make sure everyone has it done.
I'm not done. I'm guilty.
Where's your computer, man? Oh, it's over there. But you're not done?
Yeah.
Okay, when are you going to be done?
Hopefully by
Later
Friday.
tonight? Tomorrow?
Well, in the future.
In the future? Oh, man. Sounds like in the future. That was in a famous movie. It was a time machine in the future. You guys remember the time machine? What was it?
Back to the Future.
No, not Back to the Future. It was a real old movie. It's done very well. Okay, yeah, I think you showed me your.
Yeah.
So you managed to get that. I thought you would.
I just moved it a little bit up, but.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Play the games where you got some latitude, right, in terms of where your N's and P's live, right. And I try to even be consistent about. After a while, there's only so many patterns you actually need to sort of create, and I try to create I try to make sort of, again, design heuristics decisions, right, in terms of the separations. Because you really want to keep your N's and P's as close as you can, right, because then that keeps the poly short. And so when you got latitude in terms of moving things around, always choose to keep them as close as you can. But then you get into situations where if you do that, you may have or prevent you from getting a contact in downstream, in which case pushing them up will keep you from going out another routing channel, right? Always choose to not go out another routing channel. Add space, give up a little bit of performance. It's really trivially small anyways, a lot of times.
I just have one doubt. So for this, if I have removed one contact from here.
Uh-oh.
I have other versions, but I was just trying to make the poly smaller. If I have to draw this, I had to make other
So
poly
what
smaller.
is, why, so is this the four, what is this, what version?
This is OA.
But how big is this device, 1.8?
Yes. This
Why
is
is it
the,
so big? That's 4X.
Yeah, but
Oh,
you
they're
could do
in
it.
series, that's
Yeah.
right, I see. Yeah, I had to play those games. So you have some latitude, you
No,
can?
but I can't move this. This should be at I guess 1.6 or something.
No, again, it's not that much. How close can the poly get to the power rail? I think you get really close.
No, on the B side I can get close.
You can get really close. What are you talking about, man?
On the B
What kind of
side,
design rules are you using over here? Yeah, you can certainly move that down.
Yeah, it's in point zeros. We can move it.
0.02 or something.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
you can
really
make it
tiny.
very close.
AOI itself to be 2x.
And then if you can move them down, I think you can. And you can,
no,
you
if
can
I
put that
move
content.
them down, then this would be an issue. There's another. I can move these two cells. Yeah, I think I can try.
Oh, you mean because this metal and this metal are
Yeah, no, I
combined?
think I can move these two transistors down and then leave these two transistors here. And then effectively have 4 connections.
Yeah. Right, but be careful, as soon as you create the notch, you're gonna have to extend these, like Don had this.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you guys have noticed that if you create a notch in your diffusion, and you got poly running, you'll have to add a little nub on the end there, right?
Yeah.
Cause it wants a little like .0,
It wants it to
0.02.
extend 0.02 past.
.02, yeah,
The
0.02.
default is 0.16.
And it wants .18, right?
But it wants 0.0, it wants
1.4?
0.2.
Oh, 1.2?
Yeah. So some design rule wanted 0.18, some design rule wanted 0.2.
Yeah. You'll have to deal with it. Just add a little nub on the end there. I couldn't figure out how to tell the P cell to.
Oh, I figured that out.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there's a like an over.
Yeah, I'll show you.
So the P cell, yeah. I mean, I end up with all these little nubs all over the place.
User-defined gate extension.
Oh yeah, so you can. Yeah, in the P cell you can actually add the extension directly that way. See, the problem with adding a little nub like I did is that if you move things around, then if you forget to move that little nub, you're gonna get a design rule error, right? And then you end up wasting a lot of time. So you're better off. It's something I didn't recognize, but you're better off just going to the P cell. The P cell is a programmable cell. That's what it stands for. Just bring up the menu, and there's what's it called again? The overhang.
You have to tell it on your, there's a gate extension top and a gate extension bottom.
Right. Okay.
You have to change that to user-defined,
Oh.
from minimum to user-defined,
Right.
and then you can just give it a number, and it'll bump it out.
Okay.
And you have to pick whether you do it on the top or the bottom side.
Is it grayed out if you don't?
It just disappears.
Oh,
if
I
you-
see. Oh, that's clever. Yeah, you make it user defined, and then you get access to that. That's cool. That's something I just learned. I built my
For
whole
the gate
library.
extension.
Yeah.
I have
Where's
used
the
this half n plus 2p. This works good for all the time.
1/2 n plus 2
Yeah, I don't
p
know.
plus
There's an option
base.
in it.
Yeah, that's one
That's
of
the
the other
longest
options that I have.
Oh, so you're saying that does it too automatically
Yeah,
extend it?
automatically extends.
No. Well, that's an improvement on
That's
the manual.
like if there is an RX beside the poly,
Yeah.
if we give
Right.
that-
You'll come across it all the time. Well, I don't know. You guys are only, if you're building 100 of these cells,
We
you
can
would
make it
come across it all the time. You're just gonna build one
There's an
more.
option.
That's cool. No, those are, yeah, I mean, explore the P cell parameters. There's all kinds of, I use them mainly to add and subtract contacts, right? I mean, that was critical to making devices series and parallel. And then I think there were some tweaks I made to the metal. Does it generate the metal? Yeah, it generates metal 1, right? For the contacts?
Yeah.
Right, but there were cases where I actually had to. I'm just telling you that I eliminated the contacts, and then I drew all of my own in, right? Because I needed them to be offset. There may be a parameter again where you can actually add an offset to the contacts on the right or left. There were some things I did manually. There were probably P-cell solutions for, but use the P-cell to the max because it'll always be there.
So I have a question. So do you want the combination to be 2x, for instance, or so? you
I
want
would
everything
like
to
for
be-
you guys. I'm only asking you to build one version, and it's the 2x is the healthiest version to build.
So so like after the series combination 2x or.
Well, then it becomes 4x. I mean, the series. What are you talking about?
No,
This?
I'm talking about the OSs.
Which?
The OS.
Oh, the OAs. Yeah, I mean anything that's in series. So, right.
So
So are you? So you're building. So you guys have a choice of building either 1x guts inside or 2x guts. That's up to you. I'm not forcing you to do it one way or the other. If you build 1x internal, because remember for your OA and AOs, you build the inverter, right? And that really you set the size of the inverter to set the strength of the drive strength of the cell. So you can choose to build the OA and AO internally with 1x design style or 2x design style. A couple of you have asked, and I said I would do it if I were doing it. I'd do 2x.
It's gonna be impossible to have space, for example.
What?
It's gonna be impossible to have space since you're gonna use 4x.
Impossible to have space.
Yeah, so it's gonna be, those transistors will be like this size.
Yeah, that's right.
And you'll only have the space here.
Just a question. I think they're using as a
Yeah, I mean, you guys are that's a gravy train cell right there. I mean, the challenge of building standard cells is when you've got to tweak every nanometer out of them, right? When you use the full internal space without extending, getting sloppy and giving up, and you have to sometimes you have to throw the towel in and say I can't do this unless I go out another routing channel. But as you probably know by now, if you go out another routing channel, you had a big chunk of real estate there, right? It's like, I only need like 0.04 or more. If I could just had 0.04 more, I would be able to fit it. And sometimes you're just faced with the reality that you just, there's no way of extending it the full 0.32, right? And you have to create space. But you just be aware that this cell is going to be used potentially thousands of times, right? So you want to make it as compact as you can, right, width-wise, right? The tighter it is, the better the timing, and the better the area utilization. So really tricky cells are the ones that are actually the 4x versions, right, where you have the full width of the transistors. Right, and you have to figure out how to get the poly in the metal. I mean, when you do the 2x versions like you did, you got lots of space. I mean, you really, I actually, in some of those cases, I started like rotating the devices, and I started playing. There were a couple like disaster cells that I have. They're probably terrible for synthesis because especially today in modern, they like you to run the poly all in one direction. In fact, they force that, I think, in 40 and beyond. But 90, you can actually run both directions with poly, right? I mean, gate, not just routing, but gates too. You look around some of my cells, you'll see I have some funky one, and I remember doing it, where I could actually make it one channel smaller by running two lateral devices somehow. I figured probably just worked on it in so many different ways. I just came upon this solution, and I said, it looks terrible, but it works. And I think you can even create elbows, right? With you'll see all kinds of stuff that, I was really obsessed with trying to make a small cell, and our chips all worked, so I must have done a good job. We didn't have any. We got 70. How many did we get? 76 chips, I think. But, if we had made 1 million, maybe I would have had a 10% yield hit. I don't know. I mean, then 2 years later, I started working with a 40 nanometer Synopsys standard cell. I didn't build their cells. I got a chance to use them. And then I got a chance to see the kinds of design styles they use. And they get crazy with Roxy. They run corners, and the Roxy is almost a big polygon. They must have some kind of automated tool that just does they do the transistor stick diagram and put the poly in. And some machine creates the poly shape. Because you go in there and you try to modify it, and it's a polygon. And I hate trying to modify polygons, and it's just such a pain in Virtuoso. Right? Try to reshape a polygon. Anybody figured that out yet?
Polygon?
Yeah, we can just move.
Can you move the individual nodes?
We can move the edges.
Each of the edges?
Yeah. It
Okay.
will reshape it.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
I struggled with it.
And I have just
got
one
pissed off with
like,
polygons at one
within the
point.
power rails, why do we have the RX active within the power
I have
rails?
that question.
Why do you have it?
Yeah.
For the contacts.
For the bulk.
Oh, okay.
Because they're
Bulk to active.
right. So you're connecting the substrate right
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So you're not in diffusion now. You're in the substrate,
Okay.
right? And so that's what that brown piece is for. Is actually to reduce the resistance. I think. I never looked at. I just follow the rules. Right. Do what they tell you, kind of thing. Okay, which time do we have? Not much. Let me, so abstracts. Did I see everyone's cell? I just want to make sure. So to build this, I'm not, I'll put maybe a short description up. I'm not going to draw it again. Who needs to? This is up on a gazillion websites. It's called a Mux-D flip-flop. Build one. I don't care how you optimize and what you do with it. Just make it work. It's got 3 inputs and 1 output. D, scan in, scan enable for inputs, Q for an output.
Do we have, inverse clock inputs or just single?
I forgot to say that. Create the clock internally, the inversion of the clock internally. Yeah. I always hated to do that because you could technically, then you're like, I'm gonna add an inverter to every flip-flop now, right, to create the clock inverse. Is it better just, to run, have clock bar and then do the inversion, in one place and then just route those 2 signals?
So those two would be 2 different input ports.
Yes, but most people put the inverter internally,
Okay.
so do it. I want
Does that
just
need-
1 clock
Does that
input.
need to be a strong inverter or can it be a small one?
It could be minimum size.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to take up any more space than, so this goes like that. And then you can share this, of course, with that. Sorry. I mean, it literally is a lot of wires crossing. You'll learn more from this cell than the ones you just did. Because there's a lot more crossovers, it's a lot less planar, and it gives you a better, you'll get exposed to just about any, dealing with the flip-flop, will expose you to most of the challenges you'll have in doing a standard cell layout. Plus, we don't have it, we need it. We use LSSD, so I know that for a fact, so we need it.
Can I use
So one inverter for both the clocks?
We just have 1 inverter, so you just bring clock in and then run it into an inversion,
Okay.
okay? So just 1 inverter and then connect the clock bars, both clock bars to the output, and then both clocks, the clock signals.
Okay.
It's 2 clock bars, 2 clocks.
I mean,
Turns
that
gates.
input pin is gonna be clock only, right?
What's what?
The input pin?
Yeah, that'll be an input. So. And then scan enable, and then D.
So we also need to invert scan enable if we need it as well too there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Right. So build this as a D flip-flop, okay, and then create the Mux-D by not instantiating this, but you guys know how you can copy the contents and then drop it in, right? And then because if you instantiate this, then you're going to give up some routing channel issue. you can actually maybe squish together more. If you create instances like the tool's gonna do for you, then you actually give up some area, right? It's better to drop the guts of the cell into the cell, new cell, but I would do this one first, and then that'll force you to focus on designing this on, this actually is going, the data flow here is of course from left to right. And so you'll just put this on the left-hand side of the cell. You'll build the 2 pass gates and the inverter that you need. Turns out that you can keep those pretty tight, right? I seem to remember building 2-to-1 muxes, even though you have to put the inverter in, you can still keep them pretty tight together.
Should we be worried
Make
about
these 2 X's, and then again, this is 1 X, right? 1 X for the inverters.
Should we be worried about the symmetry of the clock signal?
No, you don't typically have to worry about it. You know, by the time you do the layout, and it will be natural for you to build this in a data flow type of fashion, where you literally lay it out like the data is going to flow from left to right. Right, and when you do that, you'll find that the clock wires will actually be routed in poly along the top and bottom, I think. I mean, I have a cell. Did anybody look at it? It's a D flip-flop, resettable D flip-flop. It's in something that I gave you. I think, may not be in the base cells. Maybe.
DFF?
Do you have it?
Is this?
Yeah, so the DFF negative reset, or I'm sorry, that's a negative edge triggered flip-flop reset bar.
Okay.
And then you have the P, do the positive edge triggered, that one's gonna be the one where, oh, what's that? That's what I want you to. Oh, is that the cell? No. Okay. So the one you have in your library is an experiment, where we actually use the synthesis tools and then ask them to build that for us using inverters and cascades. Don't use it, it's a real waste of space. The one that's in there is called DFF X2, PX2. Yeah, if you look at it, it's a synthesized, tool synthesized D flip-flop, right? I do not want you to do it that way. It's not efficient.
So started freshly?
Yeah, start fresh, but there's that one right above it, I think, is a good one. That might be a good one to look at.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so the one right above it, right, now, this one is actually more complicated than the one you'll build. Because it has a set function, right? So really, you want to build something that is similar to this, but it's actually going to be simplified. Do I run the clock? See the poly along the top and bottom? That's how I bring, I think those are both clock. Are they clock and clock bar?
You have clock?
This is clock.
Yeah.
This poly, does that go up and then over? It goes down and then over there.
Oh,
Yeah, so clock runs there, and then the output of that inverter comes up. It gets tricky, huh? Let's see, how do I do that? Over here. Right, see my inverter goes this way. So you have the clock, the inversion, it goes back and then goes up, and then ties in right there. So that becomes clock bar. So study the one that I gave you, you'll learn from it.
Is that fine to have long polys?
Hmm?
Is it fine to have long polys?
Yes, that long is fine. There's, it's capacitance only when the wires are in the micron range. You don't get any transmission line effects. Right, you just have, a longer rise time or fall time. But that's a reasonable, a couple of microns is okay, right? No problem.
And why are we having a thicker polys than the?
Reduce resistance. So again, it's a design heuristic. And this is the same width that they use actually as surround on the contacts, right?
Yeah.
So I just stuck with it. Was it 0.8 or something? 0.08?
0.14?
Oh, 1.14. 0.14, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, he was asking about why is the poly wider between the cells. Well, it reduces resistance. So and it helps manufacturability. It hurts you maybe a little bit in performance, has a little more capacitance. But again, there's no hard fast rules. These are just I got good at layout about 15 years ago, and I worked at IBM and I built something for them, and they liked it and it worked and patented it. And so over time, I just developed certain heuristics that I felt were good. So, I rationalized this is kind of free and it makes sense to do it, right? If you route minimum size poly all over the place, it's the smallest feature, right? And, if you run DFM too, I think, there's a DFM checker. So you bring up DFM, try running DFM on my cell. How do I do? Then compare it with the DFM on your cell. So DFM they'll give it a score. There'll be a score that.
DFM, we need a run set file, right? We have
Oh.
one.
What do you need? You need this to rules, right?
Yeah.
Do we get DFM rules with this stack?
No, there were like in the caliber folder you only had.
No, I don't think we have DFM rules, guys. Sorry. I'm thinking of the 40. I don't think, you can go out there. So we only have XRC, LVS, and DRC, right?
Yes.
So they didn't give us the DFM rules. I mean, it's amazing. So you can't run DFM, huh? Maybe you give it the DRC deck.
Yeah.
Try running the DFM rules may be encoded in the DRC deck. Oh, I think about it. So point out to the same. You can probably use the run set used for DRC then, because you're already pointing to it, right? Use the run set for DRC. See if that works. We never did any of this, believe it or not, when we built this chip, but when I built the 40, we had to. I mean, the foundry said you have to pass DFM.
What is DFM?
Design for manufacturability. So it addresses the very issue that you just brought up, that the design rule says that you can run minimum this and minimum that, use single vias and so on.
Yeah.
But then they score it and they say, so what they do is they give you higher scores if you widen the poly, if you keep like the gate extensions a little longer than the minimum,
Okay.
right? And things like double Ving, and then they score the cells according to the more robust that you designed, the more of these robust rules that you use.
Okay.
Design manufacturability friendly, right? They have a set of rules. In fact, they'll fail you and tell you where it is that you should create. I think they tell you about double vias. They'll tell you about the gate extensions, and they'll give you flags and say you should do this because then your yields will go up.
Oh,
And if you're building millions of chips, even 0.5% is probably millions of dollars, right? So DFM came along about 15 years ago and has been sort of the rule of the road now. And then the tools have gotten really good. Has anyone got it working?
It ran, but I'm not sure.
It should bring
how
up
to
a
actually
window.
interpret this.
Oh, did it bring up an RV?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so it is running.
I just gave it the DRC.
There should be something that gives you a score. It says at the top, I'm trying to remember what this was. What are these value options at the top here? Buttons, try the buttons first. What are these guys? Any flybys? That's a drop down. What's under there? So this is just like the DRC where it goes to the layout to show you what the problem is. You should bring up like a results window. I wonder why it didn't run windows. I have some instructions on this. Maybe I'll look them up and then it looks like it's running to me. Or maybe it didn't have any rules.
It says run CFA.
CFA, yeah.
CFA mean
CFAB what?
when I launch DFM, it automatically changes to run CFA.
Yeah, this is the same window he just got.
It gave me a long list.
So what's under that PC? Okay, so click on the PC. That's just the, oh, okay, now we're getting some results, I think. So, there should be a score window at some point. I don't remember how you bring it up. But it's just gonna point you to the various pieces of poly that you have in the design.
Then why
Check
does it show as an error or something?
Yeah, it looks like it's an error, which, I don't know. So what's it say? It tells you what the error is.
So whenever there is an overlap, it's kind of highlighting that, you know,
Yeah, but what's that say? For,
vertex polygon conflict. Check PC. It's just highlighting this with yourself.
yeah. It gives you the details, which I always just looked at the score, and unfortunately, it's not doing, you know what, you may not be able to do a score unless you do like a design. Because I think it then gives you some overall manufacturability score. When you're just doing the cells, it will just point to Dfm violations, right? So there are, just like DRC, there are Dfm violations, and they'll tell you that, you know, if you extend that poly, you know, maybe it looks like it might have maybe one more extension around the via. But, you know, you can figure it out. The X's are certainly DFM violations. That's what it looks like to me.
Give me some.
So we'll do ELC next time. What?
Give me some long list.
Yeah, so these are each of the layers. So does it have, I was trying to find a place where you can actually just turn on.
So wherever it has kind of an irregular shape, it's highlighting it.
Where's the browser? I actually haven't run DFM on this technology yet, so each technology has its own set of rules. Yeah, the one that we got, it was an IBM caliper deck too that we used for the 40 nanometer. I just, I'll have to maybe tinker. Remind me to play around with this before the next class, and then we can figure out how to get the results maybe.
It's kind of highlighting all the polys which are where the bit I have changed. So whenever there is a change, it's highlighting all those as errors in this thing. So everything is kind of.
Where you have the jobs maybe?
Yeah.
Well, that's just a rectangle. I think that might be, maybe not, you know, maybe if you extend this, that one, you know, if you extend it and rerun it, it might actually disappear. It should tell you what the rule, what rule it is that you're violating in the window. Is there like, can you just show like violations, like unresolved, or
Yeah.
like you can with DRC? But it gives you the same list. So this is not scrollable, nothing, no other information. It's listing it with an X, which suggests that there's a violation, but it doesn't seem to be explaining it.
These are all some case.
There's no such thing. Worst case scenario.
Alright, well, never mind. Maybe we don't have the DFM deck, I don't know. I just want to, you know, I'm just saying, you're gonna get, when you go out and do this, if you go out and do this, you will certainly have to, do you guys at Sandy have to do DFM stuff, or?
At the idea though, is I don't.
Oh, you guys farming out. I keep forgetting.
I have experts that do that a lot better than I can.
I try to understand this, but I think it's not working. Even I checked on internet, because you can't insert the clock inside the loop.
Yeah, I have to one.
What are you saying? That this is not
This one.
the other version of the flip flop we had?
Yeah, because you can't insert the clock inside the loop. Because if it's 0, then it will the output will be
Yeah.
for sure. So.
Okay, let me think on it here.
Yeah, that's what I said too. Because what we need to do is put the clock.
Clock and clock bar.
Yeah.
I don't remember having. I haven't done this cell in a while, but I don't remember having to invert both of them. I don't know why. And maybe D goes into both. No. Don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is clock and clock bar, because the dominant value
Yeah.
for a NAND gate is a 1. So when clock is 1, then that would force both of these gates to be
Exactly. Because NAND problem with 0 value.
well, let's see, dominant input's a 0, right? So a 0 on both inputs would then cause it to be both would be a 1. Yeah. Anyway, don't scratch that.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. We're not building that anyways. I can just take 5 minutes and look. I have notes on all these versions of the gates.
So
My
in your
website.
previous designs, do you have any DFT considerations?
Yeah, this is a DFT consideration. And then when we get to RC, we're going to insert scan chains. So we're going to have it do it automatically, but it needs that cell. In fact, it needs the D version of it too, because you're not going to build, when I give you VHDL, you're not going to have a scan chain in it. Right? And so when you synthesize it initially, it's going to synthesize with just D. So make sure you keep both of these cells. Right? The D flip-flop without the scan, and then the version with the scan. Because we synthesize initially with the version without the scan. And then once we get to a certain part in RC, we say, okay, insert scan. And what it's going to do is going to go to the library and say, is there an equivalent replacement for this D flip-flop that has a scan feature?
Okay.
And then we'll tell it what to look for in terms of inputs, what the test inputs names are, and it'll go, oh, I found a match. And then it'll go inserting DFT scan chains. And it'll replace all the Ds with the muxes, D flip-flops.
So we build another group of scan flip-flops.
What? What?
So we're going to build another group of scan flip-flops? Or?
No, just that. So what I should have said, I didn't say it properly. I told you to build this first, and I knew I was saying that for a reason, but I forgot why. You have to have the D flip-flop in your library, because when you do the synthesis, I give you VHDL. It's going to look for the D flip-flop to represent the D flip-flops that are described in the VHDL. And it's going to use the D flip-flop. It won't insert, and then once it does the initial synthesis and you get down to the scan insertion point, it'll then go, okay, in order to do scan insertion, I need to have the equivalent circuit that is scannable. And what it'll do is it'll go and it'll look at the library and say, oh, there's a circuit in there that has a D flip-flop, but then has a scan mux with the correct test signals on it. And what it'll do in the design, invisibly, is replace all the Ds with mux Ds, right?
Okay.
And then it'll stitch the scan chain together. And so what comes out as a net list will in fact have the D flip-flops, but it will also have a completed scan chain. In fact, you can control the scan chain order, and there's all kinds of things you can do in RC. That you just let it do it, or you can force it, or whatever.
But we're not using the instance for D flip-flop with the scan, right? So even then, the system will scan, will know that we have a D flip-flop with scan.
It knows only by virtue of the library that you give it. Okay, you give it the library. When we give it that .lib and that abstract file, there's two libraries that or two files that we'll give it. Left file, which is the abstract view, and the lib file, which we're going to create next time with VLSI. Those two will have instances of each of the standard cells in it. there'll be a D flip-flop and a D flip-flop with MUX. Now, when it goes to translate to VHDL into a structural net list, it's not gonna find any MUX D descriptions, right? Because the VHDL will not describe scan at all. There's no scan in the VHDL. There's no design for testability in VHDL, unless you code it in explicitly.
Okay, so,
And so what it'll do is it'll synthesize with the D flip-flop only. And then once we run the script, the tickle script gets to a certain point, it says, okay, now I want you to add this DFT feature called scan. And then it's gonna say, well, in order for me to do that, I better, you better have another cell in the library that is equivalent to this D flip-flop, but has the scan interface to it.
Okay.
And then it literally just takes out the D flip-flop and puts this one in. Remember, it's just a schematic at that point, so it's real easy for it to do the swap. Okay, and then it'll stitch the scan chain together, and then you get 3 new signals that you don't have in the VHDL that are added to the inputs, right? So all this stuff will magically show up whenever the net list is finalized. And then you take the net list then into Encounter, and Encounter, of course, will, Encounter will obey whatever the net list is. But it's RC that, it's the synthesis, behavioral to schematic, that actually adds the scan, not RC. RC will restitch it, Encounter will restitch it, will reorder it, and do all kinds of optimization, if you allow it. Or you can force it to use whatever. A lot of people want to define the order of the scan chain, because they test the chip system, so they want to be able to define the order in which the data goes in and comes out.
Is this your D flip-flop the same design?
Yeah, it's gonna be, that's why I want you to do this one first. Don missed, he ran out here. But I wanted you to do this one and save it as a cell. Don't destroy this one. Keep
Yeah,
it.
yes, no, the one which you have in the standard cell.
Yeah, but this
Is
one,
the same design?
well, it'll be, you have to, look at the schematic.
Okay.
I mean, schematic will show you, you have to be clever in how you do the reset, because you have to add the certain gates. You have to add an NOR in here and an AND in here. Look at it, because the reset will just instantly, it's an asynchronous reset. So as soon as you hit the reset, boom, the cell is reset. You don't have to wait for the clock.
So is this one split 2 times?
So it forces the state of the cell back to 0. Or set, in this case, sets it back to 1. Right? Yeah, I mean, that was just a fun thing. I don't remember whether I actually used that cell in my chip. I remember spending about 3 days on it though, because it was real tricky to build.
Is this design acceptable?
When do you summarize this?
Right. A week from today.
I have to remove the VDD contacts. I can add one here, but there should be a distance of 0.21 foot gate and then this.
Yeah, that's plenty. I cheat like that too. That's still plenty of flux. If you can get them in, great. So why is it complaining?
So this,
No, because this is a contact violation.
no, from poly to this end well, there should be a
Oh,
0.21.
that's a real cheat. No.
It's not exactly the same.
Yeah, I do that too, but it's rare. Just be careful this doesn't get,
No, like there is enough distance. If I add another cell, it's 0.26. There won't be another.
Right, okay. So did you have to drop it down that much?
Which one?
Was that to add that contact?
Yeah, to add this one, right? So there is a minimum distance of 0.12 between these wires. So it's a total effective of 0.26.
Okay, well, let's see, where are you wasting space here? So, let me scroll up just a little bit.
I tried to get this VDD at the edges and then combine this, but then it has some kind of crisscross points.
Yeah, the difference here is that you have 4 pins, or you have 5 pins actually counting the output. That's what's really created, because these pins take up space here. So you ran your rail here, and then you combine them here in the rail, so that's a rail 2, right? You join them there, I see. Sometimes, if, in this case, I don't see how you do it. only other thing you might try to do, see, the pins are fixed, so you can't move them up and down, right?
Like, I can move this transistor, right side and then I can take this pin out, but it just elongates the poly, but it won't give me any space to move any of the.
I saw him when he was walking department, and
Well,
you know, some of face features
Yeah.
matches with
I mean,
him.
it's a good sell.
He has a long
It's a
beard.
good sell. Okay. Are you okay then?
I have a question here, really quick one. What is the difference between the scan-in and the D?
Well, scan is, so you only use the scan in test mode. So
Okay.
you have this special, like right after manufacturing, you have what's
Oh,
called
so
test
we
mode.
have an external pin to?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Is
an
it
external
I?
pin. There's only one of them actually.
For debugging?
Yeah, and it allows you to set the state of all the flip-flops in the whole design,
Okay.
just by shifting and shifting in zeros and ones. You can get the state of the entire chip. You can have tens of thousands of flip-flops, and with one pin, one scan enable,
Oh,
you can set the entire state.
okay, but
Sure.
these
It's
is
really
different for
powerful.
each.
Hmm?
The data is gonna be different for each.
Right, I mean,
for
you know,
whatever
this
it
is, you know, when you get the
Yeah.
manufacturing test, what you find is that if you don't have scan, you're at the mercy of whatever shows up on D, and a lot of times you can't control D directly.
Yeah.
And so when you're generating vectors, you wanna test certain paths and certain nodes, and it becomes really difficult problem to solve, right, for the manufacturing test people.
So
And they
it's
just
for
said at some point,
debugging.
we can't solve